Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. Last week I posted a video called Important Message to Truthers, the truth behind the econ crash, New World Order, Jade Helm in September 2015. And I talked about the fear that's being pushed out there, this idea of panic and anxiety that seems to be permeating much of the truther conspiracy world. And what I found interesting is that just a day or two after I posted that video, everything in the news, both in the real and quote-unquote science fiction world, were all aimed at the apocalypse. Now let me clarify right from the get-go. The apocalypse, most people attribute that to the end of the world, but really the word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apokalypsis, and it means disclosure, appearing, coming, lighten, manifestation, revealed. It's a revealing, it's an appearing, it's a coming. So keep that in mind as we look at some of these topics here, because I think there's a lot of conditioning happening, and obviously the fiction world is leading the sort of countenance or the overall atmosphere of the world and what to expect. Now, the majority of the population of the Earth, they're so segregated, I can't make a huge generalization, but I would say a lot of people who are simply living day-to-day lives, they see pop culture, they see mainstream media, they see mainstream entertainment, and they see it as nothing more than that. But we know that there's always a hidden agenda behind these films, and we've talked about that on this channel, and many other channels have done a great job exposing some of the occult and esoteric agendas and themes that are wrought throughout major motion pictures coming out of Hollywood. And another thing I want to clarify is that in the video, Important Message to Truthers, I talked about how we don't know when the Lord's going to return. We don't know if it's going to be 100 years. It could be 10 years. It could be 200 years. We just don't know. And there were some of you that came after me and said, how can you say that it's going to be 100 years before everything in Bible prophecy is fulfilled and all this stuff? And I wanted to clarify that I said it could be. I didn't say it will be, okay? And we just don't know. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to Bible prophecy or things happening in the world, because obviously things are happening, it's crazy, and we should pay attention to it, and we should understand biblical prophecy to understand what's happening in the world today. But the key point that I wanted to make in that video is that we aren't supposed to panic, we're not supposed to have anxiety and fear over what's coming about. And so that's the main key. It wasn't really the number of years before Bible prophecy is fulfilled. I'm more talking about our response to what's happening in the world. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about the X-Men trailer, the movie Apocalypse coming out in 2016. Also, Dawn of Justice, the trailer just came out. But I'm also going to talk about a couple other things, the Temple Institute and their announcement on Sunday about the Red Heifer, and also Pope Francis and some of the things that he's been doing down south of the border. Now, I know I could have separated these topics into different videos, but I thought I'd just tackle it all at once because I'm still working on the film Inhuman, and it's coming along. It's going to be, I think, a really, really groundbreaking film. It's definitely balanced. Of course, Tom Horn is the main man in this film, and he's coming from a Christian worldview about the topic of transhumanism. But the interviews we have with several of the people who are pro-transhumanism, the advocates of it, I think it's going to help people understand where they're coming from, and it'll be a good film to stir the conversation, both in the church and out of the church. And transhumanism is really going more mainstream as we see things unfold here, and obviously things like X-Men and even Dawn of Justice to some extent reflect that sentiment. So let me start with the new X-Men trailer. Now, of course, it hasn't been officially released yet, but there's been, leaks and stuff of the trailer from Comic-Con over the weekend in San Diego. And there's a couple things that obviously stood out to me. The main antagonist in the film, allegedly, is this guy named Apocalypse. Now, he's got some very interesting lines in the trailer. Let me just repeat them. I'm not going to play the bootlegged version of the trailer from Comic-Con, but here's what he says. I've been called many things over many lifetimes. Ra, Krishna, Yahweh. I was there to spark and fan the flame of man's awakening, to spin the wheel of civilization. You are all my children, and you're lost because you follow blind leaders. Everything they've built will fall, and from the ashes of their world, we will build a better one. Wow, okay. This is actually very interesting coming from the sort of esoteric perspective. First off, I've been called many things over many lifetimes. Ra, Krishna, Yahweh. This is the same sentiment that is shared on the film Zeitgeist, that Yahweh, Jesus, Krishna, Ra, Horus, they're all the same entity. They're all these dying and rising gods. And that whole perspective has been debunked so many times that it's pretty amazing that they're still pushing this. And I'll leave links in the description section to where you can go look for, Zeitgeist Debunked by Chris White and stuff like that. But in essence, to lump in Ra, Krishna, Yahweh as an example of this entity apocalypse, I think is not unlike what we're going to see if and when the Antichrist figure will come to be. And the dragon that gives the first beast all of its authority and power, this entity may claim to be Ra, Krishna, Yahweh. And I think there are parallels here with Superman that we'll get into with Batman and Superman and Dawn of Justice in just a moment here. But there is another interesting line from one of the female characters. I don't know which one it is, but here's what she says in the trailer. Ever since the world found out about mutants, there have been secret societies, cults, who see them as some kind of second coming or sign of God. And again, this sort of shares the sentiments of many of the people who are in the transhumanist camp who are looking to genetically modify humans. And the mutants, the X-Men, are sort of enhanced humans in so many ways, each with different kinds of, a source story or backstory of how they got their mutant powers. But in essence, they are sort of, in generalization, a enhanced human race. So they're seen as sort of the saviors of mankind, and they're going to have to fight against this God that is coming. And there's a couple different angles. Obviously, the Ra, Krishna, Yahweh thing, the flip side of how might that play out is that this is actually the real God, Yahweh. This is actually talking about the apocalypse, the second coming of Jesus, but they're going to see Jesus as the enemy, as the world will see him as the enemy. And, it would be easy to see him as the enemy if, they say he's the same God as Krishna and Ra, and he doesn't have the best intentions for mankind. And, obviously the idea of, quote, I was there to spark and fan the flame of man's awakening, that, that line coming from Apocalypse very much echoes the Luciferian doctrine, the Promethean view that this other godly figure, this entity, came and gave mankind the spark of life, the awakening. It's taught in Theosophy, it's taught in other secret societies and everything else. So that's nothing new there, but it plays on the same themes. And so I find that really fascinating. And I think ultimately what I think is going on is that these types of stories and films are, first off, they undermine the biblical worldview. Obviously, they're going to do that. It's Hollywood. They mostly are coming at it from a Kabbalistic perspective, at least specifically drawn in Hollywood. But I think they are portraying what they sort of want to happen, which is that mankind prevails. And it's very interesting that in this case, instead of, worshiping Lucifer in a sense, they're saying, well, the one who gave us life is now our enemy because he is trying to control us and take over. And so this apocalypse figure, most likely, in my opinion, is going to be portrayed not as a direct second coming of Jesus, but I think more so this idea of as a figure that believes that he is going to better the world, and the world not really falling for it. And, the world saying, we're going to fight against this thing that's coming. And, again, not having seen the film, not really knowing all the plot lines and everything. And I'm not the biggest Marvel comic fan. I know there's some of you out there that have talked about Fantastic Four, and somebody told me recently that the plot line of the Fantastic Four for the film was changed in a sense because in the original story, the Fantastic Four got their powers from, some sort of outer space solar radiation or something like that. But in the movie, they go through a portal, they go to some other dimension, and they gain their powers there. So all I know is from my end, I see things and I see an agenda. I see the propaganda here. And I'm trying to make you guys aware of it because obviously, there's an entertainment factor here. There's always going to be a underlying subconscious message that is being planted in the minds of many people through entertainment, because that's when most people will suspend their disbelief about these topics. It's just a movie. Oh, it's just a story. It's just science fiction. Well, there's a lot of reality woven through these films and what they're portraying and what they're trying to propagandize. So those are some interesting quotes from the X-Men trailer, Apocalypse, this bad guy. Let's move on to Dawn of Justice. Now, this is, of course, Superman versus Batman. There's been a lot of hype around this film. And, here are some interesting things from the Dawn of Justice. Now, first off, the trailer starts off with, a meeting in Congress. And one of the congresswomen say, today is the day of truth. And they show all these picketers outside. And, let me read some of the signs. Superman equals illegal alien. Tell us the truth. This is our world, not yours. Aliens doom nations. Earth belongs to humans. God hates aliens. This is just amazing. This is really funny, actually, that they would use these picketers. And of course, they have to put in that God hates whatever sign there, just to portray the Christians, as the crazy ones. And so let's continue. There's a lot of interesting stuff in this trailer. Later in the trailer, they show a flood scene, which is very interesting in itself. And someone on the rooftop with the big Superman symbol reaching out in religious fervor, in a sense, to Superman, who is being portrayed as being cloaked in the sun. Again, it's so easy to play on the religious themes here, biblical themes mainly, to portray these superheroes. And then there's a line, people hate what they don't understand. Be their angel, be their monument. Very interesting. And then there's the line, do you know the oldest lie in America, Senator? Devils don't come from hell beneath us. They come from the sky. Very interesting line there. And I don't know how this character is being portrayed. Perhaps, again, somebody might know better than I would. I'm just guessing here. Maybe he is the quote-unquote religious fanatic here that is opposed to this idea of Superman coming on Earth. And that's just speculation on my part. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. I know you guys do it all the time with my little tiny mistakes that I make along the way with this kind of stuff. But let me move on here. Black and blue, God versus man, day versus night. So again, this apocalyptic sort of end of the world thing, two superheroes going at each other, one that comes from the sky, one from the earth. Batman's unique because he's a character that's a normal human. He doesn't have like ridiculous superpowers or anything. He just has a lot of cool gadgets and whatnot. But in any case, same apocalyptic themes going on here. So those are some movie trailers, obviously, that are pretty big films that are probably going to be out in 2016 that portray this sort of thing. And what I find interesting about the Batman versus Superman thing is that they include this whole alien concept along with everything else. That Superman is an alien. He comes from outer space, and, that's where the demons come from, according to that guy. It just seems like they're, first off, trying to prepare us for some sort of event. Obviously, we've been talking about that for a while, but also I think they're trying to confuse us. And, there have been movies where the aliens are the good guys. Some movies, the aliens are the bad guys. And I think they're going to play on the theme of ambiguity in terms of who is the good guy, who is the bad guy, for or against Superman, for or against Batman, that sort of thing. So in terms of that, there's definitely a divide and conquer mentality here. And one thing I didn't mention about the whole X-Men thing is that there's definitely an order out of chaos philosophy there as well, with the apocalypse saying that, we're going to build a better world out of the ashes of this one or whatever. So again, lots of apocalyptic themes in movies. It's very popular right now. And although for the majority of people viewing it, it's just entertainment, we know that there is a worldview being pushed regardless of whether or not they believe it. So that's one thing. Let me move on to briefly a couple different things here in the news recently. And again, I can't believe all this stuff came in the news all at once. Right after I put out the truther video, like important message to truthers and, don't be afraid. There's a lot of fear mongering going on. And then this kind of stuff comes about. So July 11th, there was an article in the New York Times. In fiery speeches, Francis excoriates global capitalism. And Paraguay, his speeches can blend biblical fury with apocalyptic doom. Pope Francis does not just criticize the excess of global capitalism, he compares them to the dung of the devil. He does not simply argue that systematic greed for money is a bad thing, he calls it a subtle dictatorship that condemns and enslaves men and women. Having returned to his native Latin America, Francis has renewed his left-leaning critiques on the inequalities of capitalism, describing it as an underlying cause of global injustice and a prime cause of climate change. Francis escalates the line last week when he made a historic apology for the crimes of the Roman Catholic Church during the period of Spanish colonialism, even as he called for a global movement against a new colonialism rooted in an inequitable economic order. Wow. Can you believe that? The Pope announcing that we need a new global movement, a new colonialism, a new economic order. A lot of people have talked about how this sort of thing is going to happen, and boom, it just happens like right away. We know that the Roman Catholic Church is not the same as biblical Christianity. That doesn't mean there aren't Catholics who are sincere believers, who are trying to do good in the world and all that stuff. That's a separate issue. But in terms of the theology, in terms of the basic principles of Christianity, the Roman Catholic Church does not reflect those core sentiments that Christianity holds. So just keep that in mind. And also, in fact, the deception here in a lot of ways is that specifically the papacy holds a 180 contrary view to the biblical worldview, which has led a lot of people to conclude that the Roman Catholic Church is the beast that's talked about in the book of Revelation, or the mystery Babylon that's talked about, who rides the beast. And, I used to not really think that Rome was part of the end times, whole thing. But it seems to be proving that it might have more to do with it than I first thought. And, I've done my homework, and I know you guys are going to post links. Go watch this, go watch that. I've done a lot of study on this topic. And, again, like I said in the important message to truthers video, I'm considering it, and I'm not going to come to any hard conclusions. I'm just going to keep it open and, understand that, hey, they can definitely be a part of this whole thing. But I'm not going to say for sure that I know or not. I'm just going to fill my arsenal of knowledge in terms of its possibility. So anyway, what's interesting is that the article goes on, and, some of the sort of New World Order sentiments or echoes of it by Francis is not lost on a lot of these people. Quote, Francis's sharpest critics have accused him of being a Marxist or Latin American communist, even as he opposed communism during his time in Argentina. So again, most people see that this whole new economic order type of deal is not so much what it seems to be cracked up to be. And then it says here in the New York Times article, I continue, quote, yet what remains unclear is whether Francis has a clear vision for a systematic alternative to the status quo that he and others criticize. Quote, all these critiques point towards the incoherence of the simple idea of free market economics, but they don't prescribe a remedy, said Mr. Johnson of the Institute of Economic Thinking. Francis acknowledged as much, conceding on Wednesday that he had no new recipe to quickly change the world. Instead, he spoke about a process of change undertaken at a grassroots level. So there you go. This sort of thing seems to reflect this idea that, they're not going to really force this new world order upon us. Now, there are certain things they can do to force to a certain level, but the people have to be convinced that they want it. They need to have the people, grassroots, come together with a change, quote unquote, right? So I think what's happening with the elite, at least from a sort of worldly level of the elite, they understand that they can't force it upon humanity. I guess they could, but I think they are even human. Just remember that. They are even human. I think they're under the deception of some sort of spiritual entity that is very ancient and does not have the best interest of mankind. But anyway, I think even them, even if they have their finger on the trigger of, whatever, nuclear weapons or whatever to destroy a whole nation or whatever, I think the reason why it hasn't happened is because they are still human at heart. And I think as humans, we are still created in the image of God. We still have that godly image within our hearts. And so no matter how little it might be, they feel compassion, they feel empathy, all these things. They just can't pull the trigger on certain events or certain things that go on. And which makes events like 9/11 that much more evil in terms of the people behind it. In any case, let's move on to the final story that I wanted to talk about, which is the Temple Institute announcing about their whole red heifer deal. I don't have much to say about this other than there is no biblical prophecy specifically that suggests that you have to bring a red heifer to, as part of the end times prophecy. What's happening here is that because of the Temple Institute wanting to recreate the third temple, as part of that, they're going to go back to certain passages like in the book of Numbers, chapter 19, where it talks about the statute of the law that the Lord had commanded. And, tell the people of Israel to bring you a red heifer without defect, in which there is no blemish, and on which a yoke has never come. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered before him. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. And the heifer should be burned in his sight, its skin, its flesh, and its blood with its dung shall be burned. And so this is something that was commanded as part of the law in the Old Testament. And this is where, without really getting into all the details, because obviously this is another huge topic, and I know I'm throwing out another grenade out there, and some of you guys are going to go nuts over what I'm going to say here. But In effect, there is a movement, the Hebrew roots movement. And, this idea that we have to stick to the laws of God and all of its, all the things that have been told for us to do. And, in a nutshell, and again, this is very brief. I'm not denying certain aspects of that. I think there's some good points, and I think it's important for us to understand what God wanted us to do, especially in the early days in the Old Testament with the Israelites specifically. But, there is a element of grace that has been brought forth with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And I think a lot of these laws that are put in place in the Old Testament, they're not mute. They're not. It's not like you shouldn't do them. Rather, it's we're not bound to them anymore, and that's sort of the deal here. And again, there is so much nuance there. So there's so many topics that we can get into with that. I just don't have time right now. I know some of you might disagree with just that general statement, but I tend to agree that Jesus came to fulfill all those laws. And it's not that the laws are abolished. Okay, that's not what happened. Let me make that very clear, because that's what I'll get accused of. Oh, Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. He came to fulfill it. And there's nothing in the New Testament that says that we shouldn't follow those laws of God. And to a certain extent, sure. Yeah, I think you're right. But there's a lot of things here that, it's difficult for us to do because, we don't live, like for me, I don't live in Israel. We don't have a holy place and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that you just can't go in 100%. I mean, you can try, but you just can't. So that's why I think stuff like this is interesting, because how is this going to affect the many Christians who support the idea of a third temple, which is very bizarre to me because, obviously this means that the Antichrist is near, and this idea of rejoicing because the third temple is happening, the Christians doing so anyway, is very bizarre to me. So anyway, those are some brief thoughts on it. And again, I can go into further detail, but I think I've gone longer than I wanted to with this video. I just wanted to drop this idea of the apocalypse rising, all these different stories coming out and what it's going to spark, especially the story about the Pope, calling for a new economic order and the Temple Institute, talking about the red heifer and genetically, creating it or whatever, which incidentally, I thought was interesting, reflected the storyline of a recent TV show called Dig. I did watch a couple episodes, but I was informed by a few people that part of the idea was to genetically breed a red heifer. So very interesting that that is a reality. Maybe they rolled out the show Dig as sort of a test run or, again, some sort of predictive programming. Because again, this sort of thing always hits me weird because it's like, okay, yeah, they just did this in a TV show and here they are announcing it. And, and the other question that is raised with this whole topic is, do we mess with God's prerogative? Are we tinkering with God's prophetic timeline? I tend to take the angle of a self-fulfilling prophecy is a prophecy fulfilled nonetheless. So even if they are trying to make it fulfilled, it is all under God's control and God's prerogative. But again, there is no exact prophecy that says, they have to sacrifice a red heifer. However, there is this idea that the Antichrist figure will stop the sacrifice halfway through the final week and stuff like that. So there's a lot there. I'm out of breath, but hopefully you guys can get a little bit of something out of this. I have a lot of links in the description section that you guys can go to. And mainly that's what I want to do for you guys here is provide a place to share just my thoughts on it. And then several links that can lead you to your own study because, I'm just one guy over here. I don't have a team of people helping me. I don't have the CIA backing me or whatever I was accused of over the weekend, or what was it, NASA? I don't have NASA backing me with these claims or anything like that. So it's just me doing this from home, and I'm just trying to provide some insight, some thoughts on it. I'm not always right on stuff. I make mistakes. I'm a normal man, one-man team over here, and at the same time, I'm trying to keep a roof over our heads and stuff like that. So it's been a challenge to do all that. And so I appreciate you guys watching my videos and sharing them. I'm just trying to keep a level head here. There's a lot of videos out there that will easily put together a montage of news items. And here you go. The end is here. There's a lot of that. And those are the ones that seem to get a lot of hits. But, I just don't want to go there too much. I sense the urgency of the times, but I'm not ready to set a date on it. I'm more interested in edifying people that are curious about these topics, but also provide somebody who may not know Jesus Christ yet a clearer vision of how all these things have been prophesied and how things are coming together. So hope that helps you guys out. I'm done rambling now. This was an Apocalypse Rising video. I may do more of these as more things hit the news wire. Hope you guys have a great day. God bless.